Yes, my friends, hello and welcome. I hope you can all hear me. I hope you can all see me. I hope it's all going well. Today, a wonderful day it is too. Is it a Wednesday? I think it's a Wednesday. I don't even have a watch on, but I always look on my wrist when I try and work out. Today, this Wednesday, this wonderful Wednesday, we're going to talk everything Canada. Yes, you know you can find my work on NEWSPASTE.com, and I'm going to bring straight in, I'm going to go straight in, no kissing, straight into one of my good friends who is going to join me, who knows everything about Canada, well, almost everything about Canada. I'm sure he's probably like, you know, is maybe like an east-west sort of coast, like rivalry maybe going on, like in the rap industry in America, but who knows, we'll find out. As I add him on, Dan Fournier. How's it going, my friend?
Hey, it's going pretty good, Johnny. Thanks for having me on. This is a little bit last minute impromptu, but there's so much going on. So I think it's going to be an interesting talk.
Yeah, I love a bit of impromptu, and I got to do more of it. I have promised people more impromptu lives because I really want to get going with the live shows much more. I mean, we're now living in a different world where it's much easier for us to communicate directly with people. I mean, we both write long form articles. I mean, do you want to tell people who have never heard anything about you, Dan, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, just just in a nutshell, I'm a longtime educator. I worked 36 years in education, 22 as a teacher. So I was born in Quebec here in Canada, or at least what's left of it. I lived 13 years in China until late 2021. During COVID and everything. And then I came back and just saw like basically my country in ruins. So I decided to have a vocation change and decided to become an independent investigative journalist to try to find out what the heck was happening here and of course elsewhere as well. So I started my own Substack just about a couple of years ago. And that's where I write my pieces, just like you. A lot of them are quite long and detail. I do a lot of deep dives. So I write a lot about Canada and globalist agendas and things like that. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that aligns us together very well. I mean, I was really lucky just after you started writing to start. I mean, I was already writing about things like globalism, of course. And so for us to communicate and get on so well, it's been a pleasure for me. And I like to I like to have friends who I can trust within the independent media. And I know that I can trust you. I've seen your work inside and out. And we're going to do a little bit of we're not going to say too much about it. I suppose we could say a little bit about it because these things are kind of like in the ether and then disappear and then reappear in writing form. But we're going to be doing an article together soon, and we're going to focus in on another Canadian. Who's that?
It's the infamous bankster par excellence, Mark Carney. So yeah, we are working on that piece, and maybe it's taking us a little bit longer than we wanted, but perhaps this is God's timing because lots of things going on here in Canada, and there's even talk about Carney possibly replacing Trudeau as leader of the Liberal Party, although I think personally, I think it's pretty bad timing for him to do so. But you never
Yeah.
know. You never know. It's in their crazy world. You never know. So, yeah, that's something we can talk about as well if you want.
Yeah, indeed. And Carney is someone he's on. I mean, I made the face, but he is definitely the Nosferatu of Canadian politics, really. He's the globalist lurking in the background who's got his fingers in all of the worst possible pies. I don't think there's a pie that tastes nice that he's got his finger in. But there's been other things going on, of course, with Canada, and even the talk of Canada has made me a little cold. So I've put on my sheep's skin. What temperature is it over there at the moment?
Minus 15.
And what
That's
about
why I have
politically?
I thought you meant
Yeah, no, I do.
actual temperature.
I think they're probably about the same, aren't they? They're very
Okay.
frosty.
Yeah, I mean the political temperature is quite tepid as well. It's pretty ice cold too with what's going on. I mean, we had just this week, and there's a lot of confusion because people think that Trudeau officially resigned as prime minister. He did not resign as prime minister. He resigned as the party leader. He promising to resign as prime minister, but he's still prime minister. And what he just basically did this week is the same thing that Boris Johnson did a few years ago. So he prorogued Parliament, which means he suspended Parliament. He went up to the Governor General to get the permission to do so, and so it basically means that we have no functioning government. We have no parliament in session now, and basically Justin Trudeau can rule by executive privilege for the next few months, and this is amidst Trump just about to take office, and he threatened to, of course, impose 25% tariffs on Canada for all goods going into the U.S. because of, there's certain things I won't mention on the live stream, not to get you in trouble there, but there's certain drugs that are, flowing into the U.S. And of course, there's also illegal immigrants. They don't just filter in the U.S. through United States, through Mexico, but also through Canada. So those are all issues that are bubbling up, and we've been trolled like no nations has ever been trolled by Trump. Well, I should say, especially Trudeau, who Trump called the 51st. The governor of the 51st next state of the U.S. Yeah. So it's not looking good, and it's definitely not a time to be a proud Canadian. So in like the history of our nation, what's going on here is pretty sad.
Yeah, so and Alan's asking there, what about Freeland as well? When Trudeau goes, will the party have to have some form of reckoning where they take down all of the people who were so prominent during COVID? And I think that's part of the kind of the reason for me that a lot of this generation are going out of power now is that they used all their chips during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some people that are still around since COVID. We have basically the health chief in Canada, Theresa Tam. She's still in her position. She's still recommending COVID vaccines to citizens and children, and so she's still there. Chrystia Freeland, as far as I know, she's still deputy prime minister, even though she stepped down as finance minister because she had two roles. So of course she's famous for having been responsible for contacting commercial banks in Canada to freeze truckers and other people's bank accounts during the truckers' convoy. So she was extremely unpopular, and so she resigned. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. The budget was tabled, but it was never really approved in Parliament, and they were just billions and billions over budget, and she wasn't getting along with Trudeau. So on the Monday morning, they were supposed to present the budget. She she tendered in her resignation with a little bit scathing letter against Trudeau.
Scathing leather. I thought she
Yeah.
gave it the whip.
Well,
She got out the cat and nine tails and gave him some scathing leather, did she?
in a sense, and of course, Trudeau's been called out by actually other Liberal MPs to resign and so forth. But I don't know. Maybe it's like his half brother Kyle Kemper once said. He must be blackmailed because like only a psychopath would stay in a position and not resign. So my guess is a little bit like Kyle Kemper, his half brothers, is that he's being blackmailed and he has to hold on to power to continue to try to do as much damage as he can to Canada. And we know he's a young global leader, and I mean, you've written about
A lot of them
Klaus
are.
Schwab and all that, so I don't need to go down
Well,
that route
I
there.
mean, the Canadians have such a wide selection of potential leaders to choose from those young global leader programs, and that's partly because they've been within the globalist sphere for a long time, and we're going to probably talk a little bit about that as well. Let's stick on the current news, because I mean the current news, for anybody who's actually hearing that, he's not actually Justin Trudeau has not actually stood down from being PM. What process do you think is going to go for that? Do you think there'll be an election called at some point, or do you think they have to install a new party leader? Will that party leader become prime minister, interim prime minister? Is it a party election comes first, or which comes first, the election or the election?
Yeah, I'm not, just a little disclaimer, I'm not a political expert, so I don't know all the rules, but my general sense is that it's not until the end of March, because they have basically it's almost like 3 months to find a new party leader. So the earliest I think that an election could be called would be, I guess, at the very end of March or the beginning of April. And the general election was due to be held in October. So, I mean, it could be held a few months before, it was supposed to be held, but this could easily go until June until we have an election. So it's hard to say. There's been talk also lately that what Trudeau did by proroguing Parliament kind of was not entirely maybe constitutionally legal, because there was the same thing, like I mentioned, the same thing happened in the UK with Boris Johnson. And if I'm not mistaken, that went to the Supreme Court. I think you have a Supreme Court, right? In on your side of the pond there. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was they decided unanimously that this was that what Johnson had done was not I don't know what the proper term is, if it's legal or whatever, but he basically did it because I think it was at the time that the Brexit was happening and all that, and he basically kind of wanted to, like Trudeau, he wanted to avoid some embarrassment in parliamentary sessions and things like that. So hey, why not?
They
Parliament, right?
Yeah,
so
there is talk about
talk about that, but of course these are complex constitutional rules and laws that I have no expertise in, so I'll dare not speculate more on that.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult, but it does seem to be that each generation of politicians burn the country a little bit in all of our countries now, burn the independence of the country, make them more reliant on globalist institutions and unelected institutions every time that they have a cycle, and then they flee at the moment when they're going to be held to account the most. And so do you think that's what this is? Justin Trudeau is entering up to the point where it's going to be most embarrassing for him, and this will just get him away with not being questioned?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't think he actually has that particular gene in his system. He like nothing embarrasses him. It seems like so. I don't know. When I said earlier he'd be embarrassed in Parliament, he's embarrassed every time he goes to Parliament. So I think he's so used to it that nothing embarrasses him anymore. He's completely numb to it. So
It makes me
I
laugh
think his ego
when you say genes, because there's a lot of talk about genes with Justin Trudeau.
yeah.
Genes with a G. We all know there's a lot of talk.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about his father and his stepfather a little bit later if you want. There's no problem.
which one round will it be? Can anybody guess who's going to be the father and the stepfather? But yeah, go on.
Oh, well, I don't know. That's all I wanted to say for that.
No,
So
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if you have a
So
specific question there for.
well, I'm interested in what you think Justin Trudeau will do next. Just before we go on to other things,
What do you
what do you
mean
think?
after he
Yeah,
really steps down and?
yeah. When is he going to remain part of the party, or do you think he'll leave and go work for someone like, I know, some big company like Tenio or something in Montreal?
Honestly, I think he would like take a break for a long time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't see him first of all, I don't he's destroyed his party. So the Liberal Party here in Canada, he's destroyed it. So I don't see him staying on board there. The party knows it, and they should have tried to should have tried to force a change in leadership months ago, but they didn't do so, and now they're paying the price for that because the polls show in Canada here that the blue team, the Conservatives are like miles ahead in the polls, so they're set to to take power in the next federal election. So that's how it's panning out, but or
Yeah.
selection, I should say, but you know.
So the Liberal Party. Let's go back in time then. Let's go back. Let's travel back in time to a young Justin Trudeau being brought up by some guy. No, but being brought up by Pierre Trudeau, who was it still a Liberal Party back then?
Yeah, sure. His
Mm.
father was part of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party, I think, has been around for over 100 years. It's been around for a very,
Mm.
very long time. So
Is it
yeah,
kind of like I suppose it's very, very similar to the Labour Party in the UK then, full up
yeah,
with
because they have
Fabian thinking
socialists,
people.
absolutely. And I mentioned pre-record that I was working on this huge piece, which I'll probably publish in the next day or two on my Substack.
Mm.
I'll give you a sneak peek, and it's a long title, which you criticized for a little bit,
I
which is okay.
criticize. I make fun of your long
All right.
titles, but they
So
are really good titles. They
anyway, the
describe it
working
exactly.
title for now, I might try to change it or shorten it, is Apologies to the World, the Great Climate Scam was launched in Montebello, Quebec, Canada, at a Club of Rome meeting in 1971 by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. So that's a pretty deep dive I have in here. I'm about 40 pages now. Which once
Wow.
I put it online, if you do the print, it'll probably be close to 50 pages. But
Yeah.
basically, I look at, in that article, I look at the foundation of the Club of Rome in 1968, and Papa Trudeau was involved
Oh
right from
yeah.
the onset in
Mm.
1968, even before 1971, in that infamous club. So yeah, I look, and he had, of course, in Canada, he had his right hand man Maurice Strong, okay, who
Oh yeah.
basically implemented all the environmental policies and all that, and he worked, of course, at the UN in various roles. But then what's kind of interesting in the fifth part of that series, and this is something I kind of get from you, because it's always important to look at people's background and lineage and ancestry. So my section 5 is titled Rewind. Who are the Trudeaus exactly? So rewind to learn about their family lineage, close ties. So if we look at Pierre Trudeau, and I'll come back to your original question, is the Liberal Party like the Labour Party? Well, very much so, because what I discovered in my research, And for those not familiar, of course, but probably your audience member is very familiar with the Labour Party, but they're basically Fabian socialists, right? And this goes back to, I think, their founding in the Fabian Society in I think it's 1895. There's this fantastic book I have right here. It's in French because it was written by a French Canadian called La Société Fabienne. Les maîtres
What does that mean?
Okay, so the Fabian Society, but I'll translate the subtitle, which is Les Maîtres de la Subversion démasquée. So the masters of subversion unmasked, right? So it goes through the history basically of the Fabian Society, and here you see the wolf in sheep's clothing. This is there's George Bernard Shaw and all those culprits who basically started it. So the Fabian socialists are basically socialist or communist Marxists, right? They were involved directly in the Russian Revolution. And so I look at and basically their main kind of school where they propagate their ideology is the London School of Economics. And, I just today I was looking at some famous alumni. We had David Rockefeller, who studied there. George Soros.
Oh, yes.
Who else studied there? There was von der Leyen. Who studied there. And, of course, Pierre studied there. Let me see here.
Pierre Trudeau actually
Yeah, Pierre
studied
Trudeau
there
studied there. When was it? That
makes sense.
It was from 1949 to 1951. He studied economics there. Another famous alumni is Kristalina Georgieva, current manager and director of the IMF. So you see, like von der Leyen, EU, IMF, we see like where these guys get their ideology from, right?
Yep.
And while he was at the London School of Economics, Trudeau was he was basically, of course, inculcated by the mantras of the welfare state, if you will, or the Fabian tenets, of the UK Labour Party, because everything the UK Labour Party does is based on these Fabians, because they've placed everybody in, the labor unions and all that since basically their inception. And while Trudeau was studying there, he was deeply influenced by a British economist named Harold Laski. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Maybe, but
Harold Laski. So he's a prominent figure there at the school during the period. He was a Zionist. He espoused the Marxist ideology. He had served as the chairman of the British Labour Party from 1945 to 1946, just after World
Sounds
War
like
II.
A Fabian to me.
Like 80s or something, or I think something like that. So basically, Pierre, not only there, but part of his education and his early years, he was learning about all these different ideologies. He went to China. He met Mao Zedong twice. So, he's a classic individualist, socialist, Marxist, communist, if you want to put it that way. And a lot of that has rubbed off on his son or stepson, whatever you want to call him, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
I say stepson because you never know, poor Margaret.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I get a lot of there's a few people online who give me a lot of shtick if I at all propagate the rumor of Justin Trudeau's lineage. But I will.
That's never been debunked, by the way.
I know, and it's hard to debunk because God, they really do.
You can place. You can actually, if you do the research,
you can place their chins over each other, and they're exactly the same.
Besides the physical resemblance, you can place actual when the Trudeaus, when Pierre and Margaret were in the Caribbean at the time of inception of Justin Trudeau, and there is possibility that they met to conceive. So that's never been fully debunked. If people think that's fully been debunked, it hasn't. But of course,
I'm trying to think. There's also
So
there's also
I'm not going to speculate too much.
One of the Bushes of the past, one of the Bushes of the past. I remember hearing that their parents went over to Aleister Crowley's little sex haven at some point during 9 months before a certain Bush was born. So I mean, I think there's a lot of those things. The thing is, they all hang around in elite.
You're talking
circles.
about Barbara Bush, right?
Oh yeah, maybe I am. Maybe I am talking about Barbara Bush. But I mean, it's there's a load of other rumors in there. There's a load of other interesting things. Was it her mother or was it George H.W. Bush's mother? Was it which one was? One of them had a car accident. It's really interesting, and if you actually one of the ancestors died in a car accident, and if you look at all of the details, all of the news reports are slightly different, and they place the body in a different place and stuff. And I was researching it secretly back in a while, but I couldn't find anything interesting on it, and other things took over. So there's lots of little points like that where you find something in history that doesn't make.
Well, what's really interesting too in my research, and I have an image for this that I'll have in my article. There's the site here in Quebec that did a fabulous job on the Trudeau's ancestry, and what's actually quite interesting is not necessarily the ancestry going back up to France, but are some famous cousins of Justin Trudeau. So these are very indirect, like links, of course, but there are connections, and I'll just name a few just so you can get an idea. There's 149 links with Justin Bieber.
Oh wow!
There's 110 links, through familial links, like different third cousins, ninth cousins, and things like that. With the actor Ryan Gosling, 94 links with Madonna.
I'll forgive him for anything, though. He's a beautiful
76
boy.
links with Angelina Jolie. There's some with Celine Dion, Alanis Morissette, the singer, even 18 links with Hillary Clinton.
So one of the
here's the most special one, Johnny. Okay,
go on, tell me.
10 links with the Queen Consort of the United Kingdom, Camilla.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
That's interesting.
And they came in 2022 also for an official state visit to Canada.
I bet they do, but they love a little bit of it. They go around the Five Eyes countries and use their one eye in the center of their head. Anyway, but when I was researching, I was very interested at one point about William Yandell Elliott, who was one of the people who influenced Kissinger quite a lot, and Kissinger's way. He was a Fabian as well, and all of this, advisor to 6 presidents. And when I was thinking, he must be from a massive family. He must be from one of these. And I remember looking back and was thinking, I think I discovered that he was cousins within the Trudeau family as well. I think there's Elliots within the Trudeau family, if I remember correctly.
I think the Elliott comes from the mother's side, if I'm not mistaken. I have to recheck that. I
mean, this sort of stuff is constant, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's any familiar ties with Kissinger, but not
with Kissinger.
I actually linked to your article about Kissinger, who was Klaus Schwab's mentor. I linked to your article about that in my own piece there. Yeah. I mean, there are some connections with a lot with David Rockefeller, actually, and also Pierre Trudeau. He was a member and speaker at the Economic Club of New York, and that club had all those like Rockefeller, all those very important figures there. So he had a lot of connections, Pierre Trudeau, especially with the Bronfman family. Charles Bronfman. Yeah, if you're not familiar, they're the they were famous for their Montreal-based Seagram's beverages empire. This started during Prohibition,
Yeah.
with alcohol and everything. And there was also, what was it, 2016 when the Panama Papers came out. There was where there was the Bronfman's son, Stephen, who had helped actually Justin Trudeau get into office, and he was rewarded with a position as
servant to the devil.
No. In the Liberal Party, basically the chair of the revenue in the Liberal
Sounds
Party.
Like a servant to the devil.
And
to me.
so he was found in the Panama Papers to have all these kind of complex web of offshore entities to basically hide the money of the Bronfman Seagram, basically all the money that they made. They were hiding a lot of this in the offshore, and this was at a time when Justin Trudeau was criticizing tax dodgers for using offshore havens and things like that. So
of course these guys all turn in the same circles. I've had it up on the screen for a bit now, but Ellen has asked, how about, I don't know about Michel Lamy. Do you know Michel Lamy?
I'm not sure Michel Lamy. Who?
It sounds interesting. Black fingers and the third eye line.
Michel Lamy. I'm not sure if Ellen can elaborate a little bit on
Lamy. She has. Look, she has.
No, I don't know. I don't know Lamy. Maybe you can ask Ellen if he had a connection with Trudeau, or.
Yeah. What type?
Okay. Mata family owns Panama. Loves Trudeau.
Well, that wouldn't be a surprise. Go on.
Oh, he had connections. I didn't put it in my article, but he had connections. Pierre Trudeau, I think, with some other powerful family in the Middle East that owned the Suez Canal, but I can't remember what's the name of the family. But there are a lot of connections. I don't go through all of them because there would be way too many. But I dive into some of them because he was quite connected, Pierre Trudeau, in Canada, and he was connected to a very powerful family called the Desmarais. Okay, and they own the Power Corporation of Canada. So they're extremely influential in Canadian politics and in the media. They own for example, there's a major newspaper. One of the biggest newspaper in Quebec, La Presse, was basically controlled by them. They're in other sectors such as insurance and energy, and so Trudeau had some ties there as well.
Not surprised to hear.
He was a member of their international advisory board too, from 1985 to 1994.
So I'm not surprised to hear all of the different connections. Technographics said Lamy is in the fashion world, and there's a lot of that around. Of course, I mean, I know that if I follow, it's always 2 degrees of separation between each of these elites and the fashion world, and places like antiques houses like Sotheby's or other places like Tiffany's, for instance, which was one of the key designers in a load of different Tiffany stuff very early on was Peretti, who of course of the Peretti family, who own API oil in Italy, and of course then you can make up. There's so many links here between the network that Jeffrey Epstein was within. Was Brian Mulroney a Liberal Prime Minister as well?
Oh, I don't remember. Was he Liberal? I'd
Someone,
have to check. Off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Someone find out and tell me in the comments. Because I came across.
Let me check real quick.
I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I remember reading about how when Margaret Thatcher was going to stand down, it was Brian Mulroney found out because Robert Maxwell called him to the Ritz in Canada, and he apparently walked into this big ballroom where Robert Maxwell's sitting alone in a big chair. You can imagine this all happening, and Mulroney sat down with him, and Maxwell told him that Thatcher was going to stand down, and that's where he heard the news from. And that family, of course, is tied in with lots of intelligence families. The Maxwells, of course, tied in. These are tied in with the Bronfmans as well, who you already mentioned. Epstein was doing business for and with the Bronfmans, and they were involved. One of the interesting things that come up in one of the articles was that Guido Goldman, who was Kissinger's best friend and head of the German Marshall Fund, which runs the neocons, he was the go-between between Epstein selling some of his New York houses to the Bronfmans. And that was kind of like funneling money. It looked like it was and they tried to make out the Bronfmans had lost their fortune at one point in the 80s or 90s, but their fortunes hidden around. And of course, there's Bronfman connections to the Nixium scandal as well, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, God, there's so much. And you mentioned the German Marshall Fund, not to be confused with the U.S. Marshall Fund. That's also basically Fabian Socialist behind that as well. And I just check real quick. So Brian Mulroney.
No, the German Marshall Fund. I think we're talking about the same thing because it's actually called the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and it was based on it launched 25 years after the Marshall Plan had been announced. And where the neocons are based outside Harvard. So it's the German Marshall Fund of the United States. But go on.
Okay, I didn't know if it was the United States, but also there's some others like strange link also between because you mentioned Mulroney, and since we're talking about both Trudeau and Mulroney, this is of course more speculative, but there was the allegations from Kathy O'Brien in her book. What was it called? Her book Transnation or something like that. What was her book called? Do you remember? She was part of the MK Ultra kind of like programming.
I know.
I've Transformation of America. I forget the title of her book, but you can look in the book, and I have it somewhere in my Substack where you could do a search in the book of Pierre Trudeau and Brian Mulroney, and they talk about when they went to the United States, and that she had experiences with them because she was basically a sex slave, right? And she was activated by certain. This is her allegations. She was activated to become the sex slave, to basically service like Pierre Trudeau and even Brian Mulroney upon certain keywords that were programmed into her. So those were some allegations. But more recently, I don't know if you saw, there was former child sex slave victim Anneke Lucas. She was on the PBD podcast in late November. She revealed that in 1972, then Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, basically wished to kill her. She explained, let me read a few quotes. She explained in this interview, quote, about Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, "I said that I could never please him as long as I was alive. That's how scary that was. It means that he couldn't kill me because at that point I was not a throwaway child. And he scared me enough so that I then tell Rockefeller," she's referring to David Rockefeller, that's what he wants, a child to kill. Then you understand that the next time he can, if he wants to use that, he can use it. Like this, I'm not making this up. These are her allegations.
Extremely interesting things about, like, when you were talking earlier about Club of Rome and his connections to Club of Rome. I came across him in one of the early news hounds where I was looking into articles during just after the period in the 70s, just after the period where the Club of Rome had produced Limits to Growth, done the World Economic Forum, speech. That's like 72, 73. And the speech in the World Economic Forum was like, echoed the enemy of humanity is humans themselves and all of this. And they, of course, had been really involved in creating these algorithms, these early computer algorithms, which in the day was like,
Model,
you'll believe, models, and they would model stuff and say, oh yes, this is exactly what's going to happen. It was just a load of lines over a page with input put in by these guys who wanted to show you the thing they wanted. It was the perfect example of how computers could be used to deceive us very early on. And that was, of course, that was me investigating Aurelio Peche, who went on to be involved in Concord as well, and was one of the main designers to the idea of limits to growth. And of course, I came across this article where they go up. It must be about 1974, 1975, and they're all up in some castle having a meeting about they're pushing the environmental buttons at this point and saying,
that was probably the Montebello Castle, which is a beautiful castle. It has a
huge
lobby,
it sounded like a horror story.
Cabin,
It sounded like these masterminds, these James Bond villain. I mean, they are so like James Bond villains that they're indistinguishable from them. And up at meeting, you're all flying out to meet in a castle within the elites for a private meeting that no one's. It's just it sounds like a novel, doesn't it?
Yeah, and another name you should mention beside Peche is Dennis Meadows from MIT. So he was involved in that book that you mentioned, right? And even a half century later, this surfaced not that long ago. I forget what the date is there, but you can search for the video on YouTube. He basically still contends that the population is a problem and that it should be reduced to 1 to 2 billion people.
Wow.
So I could quote a little bit from what he said, but basically that's what he said, and I'm including the video clip in that section of my post that's coming up. We know it's all about depopulation, and I outline a lot of it. These models are all bogus, and the models, even in that book, that book was written 40 years ago, and it stretches out to the end of this century, in the year 2100, and still, even now in Canada, they're trying to change the entire financial and insurance industry and all that to be based on models of climate change that date all the way there. And it's crazy. I could give you a personal anecdote. Like just several months ago, I received a renewal from my house insurance policy, right? I insure my house. And the premium was going up by 60%. So I was wondering what the heck is going on, right? It's like a huge increase. So I called it's TD. I'm going to mention them by name. It's TD Insurance in Canada. And so I called them up and said, why the big increase, 60%? And then I think they had a junior agent, and she kind of spilled the beans a little bit. Maybe she shouldn't have, but she told me one of the reasons, besides the increases of insurance costs, like let's say if people have a claim, it costs more to rebuild because of the increases in prices of materials and labor and all that. But the other reason was because of flooding. And like where I live, there hasn't been like any flooding in 20 years or anything like that. So I emailed them. I actually as a journalist, I made a media inquiry to TD to ask them about that. What are you justifying these? What are the models?
It's like a cop pulling out his
and my
badge
home is
at a
in
restaurant.
the high part of the city. There's no chance of flood here. But if you go to the United Nations website, there's a specific. They have a specific branch for all the insurance companies, and you can search by country. And I did a search, and TD is there, and a lot of big insurance, Sun Life and Beneva and other ones are listed for Canada. So I think they're being basically ordered by by the UN schemers to implement these. And I have an article on my website. Is basically, I forget the exact title, but it's Canada's carbon colony. You will neither own a home nor be happy, or something like that, because basically that's what they're doing. They want to basically remove home ownership. And these are all, World Economic Forum plans. This is already happening in New Zealand and in Australia. There's a big chunk of, coastal land and different areas where there's no proof of, flooding, but they're using these bogus models to label them as danger zones, so that the homeowners will not be able to get insurance. Hence, they could never get a mortgage or anything like that. So they're trying to implement these exact same things through various bills. There's one bill in particular, a Senate bill, that they're doing that. I wrote a whole article on that, and an open letter to all 105 senators, calling them, basically explaining the dangers of this bill. Not one, of course, senator answered me, but these are the kind of things they're doing behind the scenes. And guess who's, highly involved in a lot of these things? Mark Carney. So I exposed what he had said in several meetings, and things he's been doing in this respect. So all behind the scenes, this is happening. This is happening in the UK as well. It's happening in many countries, especially the Commonwealth countries. It's all very stealthily, sneakily, implemented bit by bit, and people need to pay attention to this. So that's kind of what I what I do. And you see, my fire is getting low, so I need to add a longer
okay,
cheese.
right.
So
While
maybe
Dan,
you can mention something for 30 seconds.
I'm talking. You go and add log to your fire. Add a log to your fire quickly.
I'll be right back. Find some questions from the users.
I will. I love log fires. I used to even accept waking up extremely early in the morning to chop wood so that I could really enjoy a log fire. And it's really nice to see everybody talking here as well. It's been pretty good. I did I saw this comment, DC. Did anyone see the Chinese painting their roofs blue? And no, I didn't see. Did you see anything about the Chinese painting their roofs blue, Dan?
Not here. I know about that. But since we have the fire going, I'll tell you a little bit.
Wait, first of all, you got to say, are there tunnels in Canada?
Surely, I'm sure there are. But because I was talking about all this nonsense too, right? That they're trying to, implement all these kind of laws and bylaws in not where I live, but there's a big city in our province called Quebec City, and last year they made it so that the homeowners who had wood stoves would have to register them with the city. And I think I forget the exact number, dirty. Like 20 or 30,000 homes had the wood stove, but only 4,000 or 5,000 registered them, right? And then they kind of did a little test run, because they said one day, it was close to winter. It was too foggy during wintertime. It was too foggy or something like that. So you're not allowed to make fires, right? Because they were trying to get this new bylaw in. And so what happened is that a lot of Quebecers who had the wood stoves, they say, fuck it, pardon my French, they just made fires, and they started posting the pictures of their fires with burning in their wood stoves on X. Some of them had their dog next to the fireplace, to say, F you, we're not going to listen to your stupid bylaws. So
have you got those pellet fires over there? Have you got pellet fires? Have you seen those ones?
You mean special pellets that you put in?
Yeah. You could. They only work with special pellets.
Yeah,
were they included? Were they included?
Would they include that?
Would they included within the wood fire?
Probably.
Yeah,
but I don't think they're ever going to get that, because it's very cold here in Quebec, and similar to Alberta and basically almost any Canadian province, a lot of people do have wood stoves, and we know they want to ban them because they want to get everybody on the electric grid, so they can do like what they're doing to you in the UK now. You have I think the highest electricity costs in the world, or some of the highest, like from the
Yeah.
past few years.
What,
So
Britain?
they want to get everybody on the grid, but I don't think it would work here. People would resist.
Yeah, the problem is we haven't got enough alternatives in Britain to
Yeah.
get away from it. Unfortunately, we're stuck within their system.
What about natural gas? Is that not popular there, or there's not much infrastructure for that, or?
No, it's all there. It's just so damn expensive. Everything's
Okay.
so expensive, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm inside, but I got my sheepskin on because it's so damn expensive. I don't want to pay money to these energy companies, and that's
Sure.
how they're going to do us in the end. In the end, they're going to make the things so expensive, and that's why wood is something they do not like at all. This
No.
thing that you could go and gather. Can you imagine that? You could gather your own fuel for your fire if you so did choose. I mean,
Well, it's the
it
same
does
thing
not
with the
help them.
food supply. They don't want people like growing their own gardens and their own food. And there's they'll maybe try to do some kind of trial run, another scamdemic with the bird flu H5N1, but I don't think people would buy it. So I doubt they're gonna try it, but they could. And in one of my articles, I actually uncovered there was a secret deal between Health Canada and GlaxoSmithKline, probably in the millions, but I did a media inquiry, and they jerked me around for 5 months, and they never wanted to release the contract. But I did find out that there was a contract for a pre-pandemic bird flu vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote a huge article on my Substack called "Health Canada's Deal for a Bird Flu Vaccine with Big Pharma Giant GlaxoSmithKline is so secret they don't want you to know about it." So I put part of my correspondence with the health. It's the Public Health Agency of Canada, because there's Health Canada and Public Health Agency of Canada, and I had to redirect my media inquiry to the second one, because they told me it wasn't the same thing, just stalling techniques to get access to information, which are called FOIAs in the United States, right? And they just jerked me around, and they never gave me the contract information. So a lot of this stuff is still going on in Canada. And we're not getting much accountability by these agencies, and basically our Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they're the ones who would supposed to investigate things at the federal level, but they do not at all.
Yeah.
So I have another 4-part series on geoengineering, which I sent an open letter to them, and they did not respond about some of the things going on. They don't want to investigate actual crimes in Canada.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah,
Not surprised at all.
Are there any other questions by your audience members?
I'm sure there's some crazy questions out there, and if you do have any questions for Dan, please ask them. I was thinking about what comes next in Canadian politics. Then, I mean, if you're looking at Trudeau leaving office, when it finally happens, what does that mean for Canada? Is Trump going to march the army straight across the border, or who's going to take over?
Yeah, well, who knows what Trump's going to do? I don't want to speculate too much on that. He's a lot of big talk there. The most likely scenario, like I said in the polls here, the Conservatives are leading, and the leader of the opposition now is a guy named Pierre Poilievre.
He's a good. He's got a silky tongue. I never trust people with a silky tongue and a quick mind when they're in politics. It doesn't.
There's that clip. I don't know if you saw it, with a journalist, and he's eating an apple. It's a very classic. I kind of wonder if that was a setup, actually. I mean, he's likely to be very likely to be the next prime minister. Now, what I probably selected, but what I don't like about him is that, and many don't like about him as well, is that he was on board with all the COVID, measures. He never called that out. I doubt he would once he becomes prime minister, he would do anything to have any kind of investigation into the COVID vaccines or any kind of accountability in that regard. He's very pro-Israel. So he likes, we've already sent, I think, over 8 billion to the Ukraine. Homelessness in Canada has gone up like crazy. And we're sending these billions of dollars to the Ukraine. And now with, you've covered this a bit as well, what's going on in Palestine, the West Bank by Israel, basically I won't maybe say it out loud, but the GENO something, right, going on there by Israel. Like Canada has no business to support that, as far as I know, like it's not like the US, they basically control the US Congress, but here, yeah, they probably have some lobbying influence. And who knows if, this is, I have no proof whatsoever, but who knows if, people like Pierre Poilievre are receiving any kind of I wouldn't say necessarily the incentives, let's just put it that way, to promote their interests, but I don't know, something stinks, it doesn't smell right. I mean, perhaps on the flip side, in the past, conservatives have tended to be more fiscally responsible, so to speak. So, the Trudeau government has done so much damage financially and economically in the country in the past, 9 years that that will probably be a positive. But and we were talking about Papa Trudeau. I have 2 big articles on my Substack, and one is fairly recent. It's basically about how, the most recent one is called, "Is the Bank of Canada working for the interests of Canadians or for the private bank for international settlements?" Now, in a prior piece, I explained how it was basically Papa Trudeau who aligned our central bank, the Bank of Canada, with the Basel Committee, right, in 1974. And prior to that period, our debt was basically flat. And starting 1975, it hockey sticks up. Okay, and I have some graphs to show that. And so every like they have bi-monthly meetings. Even your Bank of England governor, every 2 months, our central bank governors go to Switzerland, to Basel, Switzerland, the BIS. They have a secret meeting, okay, where they discuss and try to come to some consensus about different things. But when they come back, they basically implement that. And the information that they had during those meetings is strictly confidential. Not even members of parliaments
Chatham
can know
House
about
rules
them.
Apply.
Exactly. Hey, guess who's the president of Chatham House?
Go on, tell me. I'm sure I know him.
Mark Carney. Surprise, surprise.
Oh my God!
Gosh!
Wait! Just before you say, I've had it on the screen for a bit. Ellen's asked, you asked him for some question. What's going on with the natives where he is in Quebec? She said, and then she said, Anishinaabe Mi'kmaq. I don't know if that's racist.
I don't know what that means. Sorry.
I think I've just insulted you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, the natives in Quebec and in Canada. It's a complex issue. There's a lot going on. There's it's not really my area of expertise. I have interviewed one guest on my podcast who talked a little bit about it. So I linked to some information there, but I'd rather not get into that because I'm not as well informed as I should be. So I don't want to kind of
okay. Another quick one then from DC, the man DC. Is the Canadian Parliament still applauding Nazis?
Oh, that was so embarrassing! Like on the world stage, like there was an actual
that was really Canadian.
For the SS, it got a standing ovation in our House of Commons, right? That was what, over a year ago or something. And it was a huge mistake, right? And the members of parliament, like, they basically all stood up to applaud him, and they all looked like a bunch of fools because they didn't know, or maybe some of them knew, but they didn't realize he actually fought, on the Nazi side, right?
Fantastic stuff. Well, but let's go back to talking about other Nazis. Let's go back to talking about Carney there. Wow, he really is. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing that he's heading up Chatham House. That's one of the darkest, dirtiest corners of the world.
Yeah, he's president
that you can find.
And Chatham House is called the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And guess who died which former president died in the U.S. recently? Jimmy Carter, right?
Yeah.
He was specifically chosen by the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Okay,
really?
So maybe,
does that explain a little bit?
Some people don't know that.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that because that is the.
Okay. Let me give you some.
I couldn't understand how Jimmy Carter got to power. Yeah, go on.
Okay, here's some titles, okay, just to show you how powerful this guy is.
It's what I mean about fingers in dirty, dark pies. These are the pies I'm talking about.
I mean, this guy, I've written before in my articles, no matter which rock you turn over, he's there like a cockroach, and he's under there. Everything that has to do with the climate scam, he is there, okay? Just a few other titles. This is 2024. He's member of the Bilderberg Steering Committee. Did you know that?
yeah, I did know that one.
Okay. 2023 to present, he's co-chair of the Rothschilds-led Council for Inclusive
you could trust them.
Capitalism.
You could trust them.
Okay. He's from 2023 to present, he's co-chair of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, also known as GFANZ. So that's basically an important organization.
Net Zero's saving the world.
He was financial advisor for COP26 in 2020, appointed by your former PM Boris Johnson. Of course, since 2019, he's the United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Action and Climate Finance.
Yeah.
Let me see. Those are 2018 to 2020. From the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, he was Global and Economy Meeting and Economic Consultative Committee for that group. 2014, Foundation Board Member of the World Economic Forum.
Who are they? They must be a small little unit. run out of a little mountain somewhere.
And 2011 to 2018, of course, the BIS's Financial Stability Board, FSB chairman, right? And this was a time where I don't know if you saw it. There was a really good documentary film called All the Plenary's Men by John Titus, who is a forensic financial investigator and lawyer in the U.S. And it's called All the Plenary's Men. I linked to it in several of my articles about Carney. And he basically shows how Carney, just before he became the central bank governor for the Bank of England, the first in like 300 some odd years of its existence, that to have a foreigner, right, run that, because of course he was recruited by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Osborne.
It's a big mark,
right?
It's a big shadow.
It's a big club, and we ain't in it, right? But basically, that documentary exposes how Carney, as head of the FSB, had basically protected his bankster buddies at HSBC and other ones to not be investigated following the 2007-2008 financial crisis. So this guy has a lot of green blood on his hands, right? And it seems like nobody's calling him out, like
I know one thing that
I'm doing and we're doing. Like he's not that. He's not very well liked in Canada, so that's why it would surprise me if he did throw his hat in the ring for the Liberal Party leadership. But I don't know, these people, they're psychopaths. Crazy. They got egos that are so big that it wouldn't surprise me if he would. So
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. I could tell you one thing that he doesn't have is a reflection in the mirror. That's true. I can promise you. And his shadow moves independently of his body too, which is quite intriguing. But you can tell. I mean, these
Oh my God.
guys they have to have they have to have a foot inside the establishment. And when you're chosen to be the head of the Bank of England and you're not from Britain, you got to know that foot's a massive foot inside the door.
Yeah,
And
you gotta
it's
have some
amazing.
skills to get there.
Yeah, it's
He's a
amazing how
smart
they
guy. I
use
mean,
Canada.
he's no dummy like Trudeau. That's why he would be very dangerous if he ever were to become either Liberal Party leader or finance minister or prime minister of Canada. Because he would be the first one in implementing CBDCs and things like that. So
Mhm.
that's not the guy we
No,
do not
no.
want him.
The infamous little Carol says Carney got a golden hello of 5 million before he was governor of Bank of England. I want to know why he didn't have to do a probation period in the job first. Yeah, most definitely. Well, I think we do know. Like I said, his shadow moves independently from his body. Stop the war on Greenland, says the boss man. It's true enough. It's true enough. But it does seem like that would be a strategic outpost. I'd like to pass a theory past you as well. And David Oatness talks about John Titus is the shizzle. He's been working with Catherine Austin Fitz. Yeah, Catherine Austin Fitz is all right.
Yeah.
She's
And the missing trillions,
yeah.
from the second set of books that the U.S. has, or FASB 56 and all that, right?
Yeah, I got a lot of history with people on the independent media nowadays, and some of it's weird history, so I skip over that pretty good. A lot of it is talking about stuff which, as well, is beyond my understanding. The financial situation, the actual financial paradigm is quite hard to understand. I kind of concentrate on where power lies. I thought Carney was next up, and then along come Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, well, of course, that's what they do. They choose a new one. And Dark Commission says, in my opinion, as many folks as possible should unite and destroy the climate hoax. This is the basis for the high percentage of everything that's going up. Once the narrative collapses, we can mop up the rest. I agree with you there, fella. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah, because the climate hoax is the glue that holds like everything together. And when I say everything, is the total power control grid. Because if you have, and we could talk about this, we talked about this a year and a half ago, if we have some huge kind of cyber attack crisis, right? If they implement some kind of digital ID, that's the big requirement they have to implement their CBDC. And in my article that I mentioned earlier about the Bank for International Settlements, I explain how their leader Augustin Karsten came over to Toronto a couple of years ago and to open the BIS Innovation Hub. There's 7 innovation hubs. There's one in Singapore, there's one in London, and they have 7 of them, and they're each working on one particular aspect of this global CBDC, whether it's AI surveillance, whether it's cross-border payments, whether it's this, that, or the other. But when you put all those pieces together, it looks like nothing that they're doing all this stuff separately, but you can see the bigger picture. If they put all this stuff together, they would have a total control grid CBDC. Because in my article, I also mentioned that last year they had done a survey in Canada. The Bank of Canada actually did this survey for Canadians, and it was a really well done survey. Actually, I'll give them credit for that. And I think they got close to 80,000 respondents or something like that across the country. But the numbers were just abysmal for them, because it was over 80% that did not want a CBDC, and close to 80% did not trust the Bank of Canada to issue one. That's a pretty those are pretty harsh statements, right? And so they had to actually scrap the plans for the specific Canadian loonie, the Canadian dollar, right? The digital loonie. But we can see that that could actually be more dangerous, because if they implement this BIS type CBDC like I'm talking about, then then we would have zero financial sovereignty, even as a nation. Like forget even individuals or businesses in Canada, even the nation would have had zero financial sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
mean, we don't
crazy.
have 100% of financial sovereignty in Canada, but we still have at least some.
Yeah,
But
I'm not sure anybody will have financial sovereignty soon. I think these guys are all. I mean, the own nothing and be happy is just something that, since they even designed that as just a gimmicky line that was just in one article, and people hooked onto it so easily because it does represent our future. What they see as our future is they take everything from us and we're still smiling, and that is just that feeling. It resonates through. I do want to talk. I mean, we've covered what you think's going to happen, a little bit about the past of Justin Trudeau, his stepfather. We talked a bit about Pierre Trudeau and some of the other sort of like links, especially with the Malthusians, the Fabians. These guys are all linked in with all of these different things. Now, I want to talk about something slightly different. This is all going to be opinion now and conjecture, and I really want to. There's a place, Newfoundland. Newfoundland, yes, in Canada. And it's a place that seemed to be, for me, me and Ian Carroll talked about this on an X space at the beginning of 2024. We were doing the Epstein file spaces. And in there we were talking about one of the routes. Normally they'd come back from places, they'd go straight to an American airport and to one of their properties, but they actually had this route that went from meeting Jean-Luc Brunel in Paris, then instead of flying straight back, they were meeting this part of their child trafficking organization, and then they were going across to Newfoundland. And I did think that could be a place where they could drop off people. Do you think Canada would be used like that by American intelligence? Do you think that's something that sounds about right?
I'm not sure, and I'm sorry I got distracted because my son just coming in the background a little bit there.
He's just taking over.
Say hi.
Well, of course, it's completely fine. Well, we come to and then we listen. We can have a conversation about that another time. I would actually like to get a Canadian person's opinion on that, so I'll send you some of the details and maybe we can do another live stream. But it's been awesome, man. I'm gonna leave you go now and rally the troops. Obviously you're being commanded, Daddy. That's enough now, Daddy, come on. So do you want to let everybody know, have you got anything to say as you go out, and do you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say, it's going to be an interesting, rest of January and an interesting several months coming up in not just in Canada, but lots of things going on in the UK, of course, these days, right? With Keir Starmer and everything. So it's going to be, we live in some interesting times. People can check out my work on my Substack at fournier.substack.com. So my last name is fournier.substack.com. So I'd invite people to have a look, and please subscribe. I'm trying to get a little bit larger following, so go ahead and subscribe if you can. Share around. I know my articles are long. If they're very long, I usually put some kind of like table of contents almost at the beginning, so you can just skim through the parts that interest you, or just kind of scroll through. I am going to publish that article about the Papa Trudeau starting the climate scam within the next few days, and we are still working on that Carney piece, which I hope we can get out in the next short while, and have and we'll definitely have a broadcast specifically for that piece. So that will be interesting. So thanks for having me on, Johnny. It's always a pleasure. You're a true brother to me across the pond, and I really appreciate you also supporting my work and having me on as a guest. So thank you very much, John.
You're a dude, Dan, and I have got nothing but love for you. And it's been great since the first moment we've communicated onwards. We've just got on like a house on fire, and we share a lot of the same views and beliefs. And when we don't, we can discuss it and talk about it and disagree as well, which I love.
Sure.
So thanks for coming on, and all my love. I'll see you soon. Okay.
All right. Likewise. Take care. Good health.
Beautiful. And there you go. That's the man, Dan Fournier. And I do love him. And I do think his work is spectacularly long form, not just a little bit long form, super long form. Everybody who's come to be involved tonight, I love it. Completely love it. I see that, the people who have been around, including Ellen, of course, Tech Noir Graphics has been fantastically vocal and contributing. Of course, Change My Picture, thank you very much. The amazing Rotting Jewels, Dana, I love you. And that's it enough. That's all I'll say about that. And we've got loads of different people, including, of course, Dark Commission, love you too. Little Carol's been in the house as well, which is like massively important. She's always got something to say. The problem with climate change is when we have to pay for clean air, what happens when the wind blows your clean air? You just paid far away. Can you get a refund or your clean air back? Perfect little Carol line there. And I thank you all for being with us. Now, I will make a quick note. I would love to do a show again with Dan at some point that's to do with the child trafficking routes that could potentially be through Canada. But this is why I like talking with Dan. He's got the ability to analyze everything, and it's been great. And love you guys. Thank you so much for everybody who's tuning in, all your support. You know where you can support me. Go to newspaste.com. You'll find different ways to support me, and all my love. Thanks for coming. I really do appreciate it.